We talk about that. Podcaster Kgaugelo Habyane has teamed up with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group to offer virtual men's mental health support group. The group is a safe haven for men to open up about mental health and any other issue. Let's bring in Kgaugelo Habyane at this moment for more on this discussion. Good morning to you, Kgaugelo, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think before we even get to the podcast, surely you identified a gap for men to open up. I'm not sure if this is because of how men were brought up, how they socialized, but why the need you felt for men to start talking more about their mental health? Kgaugelo, I can't hear you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
There you are. Yes, Kgaugelo.
I think, to start with, I think to start with, as you've said, because of upbringing, because of the places that we're from, and, mainly also the kind of stereotypes that come with being a man. And also how I grew up personally, I felt that there's a certain change in the way that we communicate as men and with my friends as well, that I kind of felt like, we always talk about sports and everything else, but we never really check in with how we're doing on a soul, on a spiritual level. And that's why I kind of started these conversations. And that's why the podcast is here.
And how's it doing so far? I mean, what have you uncovered about men and either speaking up or not speaking up, which you felt you wanted to break? What have you discovered through this podcast?
Well, I think a lot of men are speaking. The thing is, as much as we say that men don't talk, if you gather around a couple of your friends, maybe, 5 or 6, not in too much of a big group, because that also stops other people from talking, and they just want to be kind of a fly on the wall listening in on the conversation. But if it's a small group and you kind of, start asking questions to different guys, then you find out that maybe, you might learn something from someone that you've known for so long, that you've never really touched on certain conversations with them, and you don't really know, what their opinion is in terms of how they process their problems, what issues they're dealing with. And once you start opening up in terms of how you're doing, then you kind of give space for other men to also start expressing what they're going through. Right. So I found that conversations are happening. Some guys are choosing to just do it on their own, in their own little informal circles. Some form very formal ones where they have, either group coaching sessions with a therapist involved. So, we found that it doesn't matter really what kind of format you have, but as long as you create the space and you start talking, then that allows for the other guys to start opening up as well. Yeah. So in a large part of it, I found books, I found authors in South Africa and, different communities, whether it's a WhatsApp group or anything like that, that are really doing it. And maybe it's not so much highlighted as much as the conversation about men not speaking is highlighted.
Yeah, and Kgaugelo, can you share with us some of the issues that men have shared on your podcast when it comes to the challenges they face that affect their mental health?
Sure. So one of the things is obviously the biggest thing right now is jobs, the lack of jobs. Men are not working at, I would say, at the rate that they used to get jobs back then. There's also the rise of women in corporate. So, how to balance that issue, so my woman is now making more money than me. How does that affect me as a man? How does it affect me as a provider? Men who don't have access to their children, for example. We have a guy in our group who's really struggling with, getting custody of his daughter. So then, how does that play out? We've spoken about stuff like drugs. We've spoken about depression. So we've spoken about so many different issues. And, the more you start talking about it, then you realize that, man, there's just a huge underlying conversation that we need to have. And one of the biggest ones as well is the shame also that we're hiding, as men. A lot of us are hiding under shame, and that's why we kind of don't come out about the issues that we have, because we feel like we're going to be judged, or there is no space, or no one can relate to us.
Yeah, or maybe
so those are some of the things.
That fear that you may come across as weak because of the notion, that men need to man up, they need to, tough times, are part of a man's life journey. So when you talk about it, it's like almost you're complaining or whimpering about it. So this platform, quite a good foundation, but I understand that you're not doing this alone, Kgaugelo. You enjoy the partnership and support of SADC. Take me through how that came about and what you are doing together with SADC.
Yeah, so I found that doing the podcast, some of the issues were a little bit too heavy for me, because I'm not a counselor, I'm not a professional in any sense when it comes to mental health, but I'm just someone who's really interested in having the conversation. So we had a support group. I wouldn't call it a support group. We had a men's group where we just facilitated a couple of conversations with guys that I know, and I felt that, okay, wow, we're uncovering so many different issues now. Let me look into who can then offer me support. So then I joined SEDEC in terms of what they do with a support group leaders training. So I did that for, I think it was over a 6-week period. And I told them that, no, I run this podcast and I'm finding out that there's so many issues that men are kind of not uncovering or not talking about. So then what can we do and what can SEDEC help me with? Then that's how we formed the partnership. And it became something that, it's part of my day-to-day now.
Wow.
I mean, look at what I'm talking to you guys about. It's something that I never thought would be such a big discussion. I thought it's something that would just happen between me and a couple of mates, but it's turning out to be quite a global conversation.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad to be part of that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we should make this circle even bigger. So where can everyone catch your podcast if they haven't listened to it already?
Oh man, the podcast is everywhere. So any streaming platform you can think of, just search for Manned Up Conversations, will pop up. Then you can also follow me on social media, Manned Up Conversations, everywhere. You will find us on YouTube, you'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, and just join the conversation. And like you're saying, let's make the circle bigger.
Thank you so much, Kgaugelo. I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for talking to us about this important issue. Kgaugelo Habyane, podcaster of Manned Up Conversations. You can make sure that you catch them on any streaming service and social media platform. Engage with them as well. Share your story. You never know who you could actually be assisting as well.